Interest for economic growth, inclusive development, and filmmaking. This is one of the main features of the young man we decided to highlight through this new episode of Regards Contemporains. Good morning, David, and once again, thanks for making yourself available for this interview within the frame of the headline of Regards Contemporains from the business magazine Les Insights de l'Echo. Now, if you don't mind, we are going to start with our first query. African thought leader and multiple award-winning filmmaker, that's how you're usually recognized by your peers. If you have to put aside your background as a filmmaker in order to introduce yourself, what would you say?
Yes, so I would say that I'm a young person who sees the problem in my society and want to help really. Want to see how I can add my voice in issues that relate to development, right? To growth. So whether it's the boy who sells on the street, how can I help to see that his life is improved? What kind of is there an advice that I can give? Is it resources? Is it pointing him to opportunities? I think that if you strip me of all these titles that I'm known for, I'd say I'm that person who is observing what's going on in my immediate environment, what's going on in the larger environment, and how I can add value, to the growth and the betterment of the society where I live.
Thanks, David, for your answer. And please, let's move on with the following query. What about your passion? I mean, if you have to share your passion for filmmaking with the people following this magazine, what would you say? How or when does it started? Which vectors made you find more and more interest for it?
So if I'm asked to share, my view on filmmaking, so I believe personally that art is a tool for development. So how do I use art to empower communities? How do I use how art to empower, different sectors? How do I use art as a tool to show the greatness of human beings, to show the development, of human beings, especially of Africa, where I'm from? How do I use art to represent the unrepresented narratives, the strengths, the things that people do not see, the growth that we experience as a society, the achievement, things that really gives hope to somebody who sees my work or who see our work. you know how do I use art as that to drive those kind of conversations and development. So for me, filmmaking is that tool that I use to reach the guy who is far in Mali, to the guy who is somewhere in Brazil or somewhere in Morocco, and when they see it, they can relate to it because it speaks to them, it speaks to our essence. So which sector or vector I find really interesting? It's the development space. So I give an example. What it is that the United Nations is doing on the African continent that is improving the community or the society in general. What is it that the African Development Bank, the Afrexim Bank, the African Union and all its agencies, what are government doing? What are government agencies doing that is improving the society? And what are the things that they need to do to also get to make the society better? So these are things that I really care about. So I want to document the great things that is happening and raise a conversation around things that I think or that we think should happen. What kind of human capacity development can happen? What kind of economic development that can happen? What kind of infrastructural development that can happen? So I'm using film as a tool for development, as a tool to draw attention to what we need to develop.
Then, what about your path, your background as a filmmaker? How do you picture it in terms of achievements, in terms of feelings, in terms of expectations?
How do I picture my part as a filmmaker, my expectation? Yes, so I am that person who wants to use his camera, who wants to use light, who wants to use music, who wants to use any form of art to show resilience, to show my people from a place of dignity, so that a kid who is growing up would come across the works, the creative works that I have done, and they would see themselves from a place of dignity. They'll watch what I have done, and they go into conversation from an informed mindset, from a place of strength, really, not a place of weakness. So my feeling is every time that somebody watches my film, they should be pumped up, they should be filled with hope. Whether you watch my movie, whether you watch my documentary, that you saw my art, or that you listen to me speaking, it should rehydrate hope in your being, and hope that complements dignity, so that you get into a room and you're not putting your heads on the ground. You look up with your shoulder tall, as a human being that is dignified. So a bit of my expectation is that people would connect with the work that I do, and also inspire other people in my creative space to begin to use their lenses, using their voices, using their hands to tell stories from a place of dignity. So somebody who is in Argentina, somebody who is in Guinea-Bissau or South Sudan would come across this work, and they would have strength, they'll have courage, they'll have hope to fight, but this time to fight from a place of dignity, to fight back struggles, see that their dreams are valid, and they are able to build whatever they imagine in their heart to do.
Then, concerning your achievements, what can you tell us about the Rise, a journey to Africa's financial independence? Can you present us this documentary movie realized by you?
The Rise, a journey to Africans' financial independence, is a documentary series that focuses on what I describe as the last hope of Africa. This is a project that touches on the economic development of our continent. The African Union has put in place or created what we call a single African market, and they have established what we now call the African Continental Free Trade Area. So this body has the responsibility to see how we can harmonize trade, to see how we can harmonize our regions, so we can all trade among ourselves. So this is bringing all the small economics, all the big economics into one space, into one market, into one market, like what they have in the European Union, where their market is single. It's easy to move within the European countries to sell goods and sell services. So that's the same thing that the African Union has put to force. And by the way, this didn't start now. Kwame Nkrumah of blessed memory, Thomas Sankara, and a few others has always put forward that we need to have a single market. So now we live in a time where this is now being implemented. So our film is showing the progress of this agreement. Our film is showing or bringing up conversation that needs to be heard. What are the struggles at the moment? How do we resolve it? What are the achievements gained so far? How do we complement it? So our film is basically following the progress of this agreement, because we believe that if this agreement is fully implemented, we would now be economically independent. A young African can now see himself with so much dignity that he would not need validation from somebody else. He would not need to leave the continent to make wealth, but rather he would decide to leave his country to another country on the continent to make wealth. So it is putting together 1.3 billion people into one space to exchange services and goods and to exchange money. So that's what our film is about, and it is broken into 5 stages. Our focus is region based. So there's West African episode of the film, there's Southern Africa episode, there is East Africa episode, there's Central African episode, there's North African episode, and then there's now the diaspora episode, where the diaspora bring back both human, physical, intellectual resources to see how they can contribute to the implementation and the growth of the African market. So all of these in encompassing is what our film is attempting to do, to show Africa from an economic, as an economic power, show Africa as a dignified continent who is now putting his house together and providing ways for his people and her people to become wealthy.
Now, as a thought leader, what is your opinion about AFCFTA? Do you think it can really help African countries to acquire their financial independence?
In my opinion, as a thought leader and as a filmmaker, really, who has paid attention to development, there is no development that is bigger than economic development. And the AFCFTA provides us that economic development, what I describe as the economic independence of the African continent. So I fondly say this, that the AFCFTA is the last chance for the African continent, because if we get this right, we would now move to economic development, economic infrastructure development. As a matter of fact, the AFCFTA is currently the only aspiration of the AFCFTA, of the African Union Agenda 2063, is the only aspiration, in my opinion, of the Agenda 2063 by the African Union that brings together some of the giant organization on the continent. So the Afrexim Bank, African Export and Import Bank, the African Development Bank, these institutions are working hand in hand to see that the AFCFTA progresses. So while the African Development Bank is focusing on infrastructural development, for example, the Cameroon and Nigeria border road, which was completed, which was facilitated by the African Development Bank. So whilst the African Development Bank is dealing with road infrastructure, the Lagos Abidjan corridor, the East African corridors, all of these things that tries to connect us by road, by rail, by air, those infrastructural things, the African Development Bank is doing it to complement so that the AFCFTA can truly work, whilst the African Import and Export Bank is providing credit facility, is providing capacity building, is seeing ways that they can also help the movement of goods, providing payment solutions to see how they can make it easy for Africans to begin to sell to themselves. So I think that the AFCFTA is one of the most important of all the aspiration of the African Union that would touch the ordinary person in Africa. So the person who is in Burundi and the person who is in Cote d'Ivoire or in Dakar, the person in Nigeria, the person in far Morocco. So it speaks to all of these people, and that's the most fascinating part of the story, because it's going to touch, not story per se, that's the most fascinating part of the agreement, because it's going to reach out to everybody, and we will now have an Africa where every man comes to the table with something. It costs us to create, it costs us to industrialize. So we won't start exporting our raw materials. So we won't be exporting our raw material and importing finished product from somewhere else. So somebody that has cocoa beans in Cote d'Ivoire would send it to somebody that has a factory in a chocolate factory in Rwanda, and value are added and it's imported to Nigeria. So there's job on these processes. Who is doing cocoa beans has job. Who is manufacturing in Rwanda has a job. Who is doing packaging and branding has a job. Who is buying to sell in a particular country has a job. So there's so much in between the value chain of this agreement. That's why me as an individual, I am very passionate about it. And you can even hear it from my voice. I'm passionate because I see money every time I see raw material, because we'll begin to add value to our raw materials.
Then, what about Boxes of Hope? What can you tell us about this other documentary movie realized by you? What are the concerns you decided to highlight through this movie and why?
So, Bosses of Hope, it's one of the volunteer work that I did in 2020 to support young kids in rural areas, to give them clothes, to give them bags, to give them shoes. It's really to give them hope, and try to paint and try to show them the dignity of being human beings. So when they go to school, they'll have new bags, they'll have new shoes, they'll have new clothes, to just help their self-esteem. That's what Buskets of Hope is about. And I made a documentary, a short documentary on it, on how an organization that is based in Warri, Delta State, Nigeria, is sharing boxes of hope to ordinary children who live in the slum. And just to inform you, the name of the organization is Clever Mind Educational Foundation. One of those communities called IYARA, spelled as IYARA, where we went to give boxes of hope. Now, the foundation has now built a school in that environment, has now built a STEM lab in that slum area. So those children who live in that slum area now have access to free education, and access to a STEM facility where some of the ideas, their inborn ideas, can find expression. So yeah, that's what that film was about, giving boxes of hope, to children who society define as people in the lower part of life.
Art must be part of the ordinary life in order to be honest. What do you think about this statement made by the American artist Bill Viola?
I I agree 100% with what Bill said, as regard um, art being an ordinary part of life, just to even show the honesty of where we are. So I think that we, as people who are in art, we are the referees, we are the projectors, we are the one who show the involvement of life, whether it's economic involvement, whether it's social involvement, whether it's industrial involvement, whether it's human or romantic involvement, whatever changes in society. I think that we are strategically positioned to be the eye to show a larger portion. For example, somebody who is in Burkina Faso. I don't know so much of what's going on in Burkina Faso. I'm in Nigeria. So if an artist shows me what is going on in Burkina Faso, whatever way he's using, whatever approach he's using, it form a perspective in my head to know that, okay, this is what goes on in Burkina Faso. That's why I encourage a lot of artists to begin to tell stories from a place of dignity, not a place of fear, not a place of weakness, not a place of shame. Rather from a place of dignity, so that when I see what's going on in your country, I would want to attend. I would want to come, and also to balance the story by also showing some of the things that needs to be improved, as against just showing all the things that are not good, and make an entire country feels like there's no single thing that is progressive about them. So I feel like we as artists, we have the power to be honest. We have the power to show dignity. We have the power to show strength and integrity.
Thank you, David. And now, please, in order to end this interview, I'm going to ask you to name three things that help you keep smiling despite the current global crisis.
So things that give me smile and even give me hope to keep pushing in face of all the challenges as being an artist. You don't have access to funding, you don't get the necessary, support from even your immediate environment. The policies sometimes don't support what you do. What keep me going is when I travel. Like now, I just returned from Ghana. When I'm in Accra, looking at that young boy or that young girl who is striving to be better, or where I'm in that conversation with that waitress, with that usher who is serving as a waitress in an event or in a bar or in an eatery, that ordinary person who who just have dreams and potential that has not found expression. When I see them, when I talk to them, when I engage with them, this is what gives me hope. It's one of the things that I'm going to mention in this interview. I met somebody in Ghana. I can't recall the name on this call, but if you want the name, I can give you the name. So I named her Chiamanda Adishe. Chiamanda is a prolific writer in Nigeria. It's one of the biggest things that has come out of Africa. She's a great playwright and she has amazing work. Because I engaged with that girl who was an usher in an event that I was co-hosting in Accra, I saw a different side of her, how she want to be one of the great writers, how she's looking for a platform to share the works that she has. Seeing that young girl like that with so much dream and aspiration, it's what kept me going. And how I can contribute to that, how I can just give a referral, how I can just point her to information that can help her. These are the things that keep me going, because one day that young girl would do amazing things in the world, and she would now have a mentality that we need to support people, we need to pass it on, we need to respect people. So if I respect her as an usher in an event, when she goes to an event where she's the organizer or she's the big person in quote and unquote, when she see an usher, she would engage with that usher, and that usher would have hope that he or she can be somebody in the future. So it's just that thing that I see when I travel, when I meet young people about my age and even below my age and hear their dreams. These are the things that keeps me going, and that's why most of the works that I've been doing for the last few years, I focus on them and seeing how they can become better and even better than I am and where I am with my life. Thank you. It's such a great opportunity to speak with you. Merci.
Merci David, c'est nous qui vous remercions et nous espérons avoir le plaisir de vous retrouver tout au long de cette année sur d'autres interviews.